So thoughts on challenge. I think challenge for me is less of a skill because you may use different skills to bring about challenge. So it's more of a concept that sits underneath the skills that we're using. And what we hope to look at today is challenge and confrontation. Because when we think about challenge, maybe the word confrontation comes up and is pretty strong in mind. Then a different definition of challenge in counseling. And then what does it mean to challenge gently? And then what does it mean to challenge safely? So to start us off, we're going to look at the confrontation side of this, because at its base, the word challenge is really carries a meaning of some form of confrontation. But confront can also mean to face up and deal with, which I think is a lovely root of the word confrontation, to face up and deal with. And if you think about clients coming in, the fact that they come into us in the first place, they have challenged themselves to be there. They've definitely faced up to the fact that they've got something going on, and they've gone and set about dealing with that. So I think that is a real good way of looking at that word. So what is it that we are challenging when we speak about challenge? And it's all about incongruence. So sometimes a client is bringing their material. They might show an incongruence or mismatch between their thoughts and their feelings. And we're going to look at some examples in just a moment. Now, when there is that incongruence or that mismatch between the thoughts and the feelings, this is invisible. We can't see it because it's happening internally for this client. But we can look out for clues. And I've got an example here of a clue of a client showing an emotion or sharing an emotion and then saying, I shouldn't really be feeling like this. So within the emotional world of the client, they're feeling this heaviness and pain, but within their head, so the cognitive thinking part is going, I shouldn't be feeling like this. And I think that's a really good definition of incongruence. So if we look at the necessary and sufficient conditions identified by Carl Rogers, he speaks about congruence, and he speaks about us as the therapists being congruent. That we feel inside, we represent outside. But he speaks also in those same 6 conditions of the client coming in a position of incongruence. And it's interesting to think that within person-centered therapy, in the purest sense of the word person-centered therapy, it is often considered that challenge does not fit. But person-centered therapy, by the very nature of the fact that you have a client coming in a position of incongruence, there is a challenge happening there. Because they're facing up to that incongruence within themselves. So there's the challenge of the incongruence. So we're going to use an example here. So it may be between the client's words that they say and the body language that they see. So for example, here, the client may say, I'm okay, I can cope with this. I've got no choice. And as they're saying this, the tears are streaming down their face, and we can see that emotion that they're carrying, but they're saying I'm okay and that I can cope with this. But how they present is not congruent to what the words that they're saying. And it's almost a feeling of, I don't have any choice. I have to cope with this. That's what the world tells me, that I have to cope with this. So despite the words of apparent coping, the body language is very clearly showing that extreme pain, the emotional distress. There's a definite incongruence. And these are the areas where it is really appropriate to use skills to challenge. And we're going to look at an example of what that might look like now. So first of all, what we're looking at here is when the counselor highlights an incongruence between the client's verbal and non-verbal communication, so as to facilitate the client's awareness of conflicts relating to particular issues or topics. So that's a definition. So if we were talking about a textbook definition defining challenge, that for me fits, because it highlights that incongruence, and it speaks about potentially non-verbal communication, and bringing into the client's awareness there's conflicts that are going on within them. So if you think about it, the challenge is always coming from within the client themselves. But if we go back to this example that we had here with the person saying, okay, I can cope with this, and the tears are rolling down their face. So that client is basically might say, I shouldn't be feeling this way. And we might hear that presentation working with clients often. I know I certainly have in practice. Somebody will say something and they'll say they may be feeling down or in a difficult place, and say, well, I shouldn't really be feeling like this because everything's going fine, or I shouldn't really be feeling like this for whatever reason it may be. So how can we challenge here, and challenge gently, that it doesn't feel like a confrontation? And the example I've used here, client, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Us as the listener or the counselor, we go in and we say, I hear that you say you shouldn't be feeling this. And I can hear those words, but at the same time, I recognize you're carrying so much at the moment that is really, really heavy. And that's showing the two sides of it. It's showing the I shouldn't be feeling this way that is coming from the narrative of this client, but it's also showing what they're carrying. And in that is an incongruence. I shouldn't be feeling this way, yet look how much I'm carrying. And that gentle challenge doesn't feel like a confrontation. It highlights the incongruence. It's not from our frame of reference. So we would never challenge directly from our frame of reference. So an inappropriate challenge would be something like, but have you tried such and such? Or maybe you shouldn't have done such and such. That's coming from our frame of reference. But we go from the client's frame of reference. I hear you saying this, but I recognize you're feeling this way. And that's highlighting that incongruence. And it doesn't feel challenging. It feels natural. And it acts as an invite. Once again, there's so much of the skills are used to invite. Specifically, if we're looking from a person-centered perspective, but not always. In many of the different modalities, the invite is so important. We're inviting the client to look at those feelings, to dive into those emotions, to look in this case at the incongruence or the difference between what they're saying and how they might be feeling or how they might be presenting with their body language. And sometimes they may take that invite. Sometimes they may choose not to take that invite. And it takes me back to that very, very first lesson in my own studies at level 2, lesson 1, where it says you can't send anybody for counseling. They have to be there because they want to be there. And it's that they want to get something out of that. And it's the same when we get to the emotions and the feelings. We can't force a client to go into those. We can put invites down, little invite mats. And by challenging gently, that is a beautiful way to invite a client to look at the incongruence that they may be exhibiting. So challenging gently, client, I'm okay. I can cope with this. I have no choice. But as they're saying this, the tears are streaming down their face. Counselor, I hear you saying that you're coping with this because you have to. So we're acknowledging what they're saying. We're kind of paraphrasing it, I guess, back to them. But we're also telling them what we see. Yet at the same time, I can't help notice the tears streaming down your face. Feels like you're totally broken with this. Look at those words, totally broken, and I'm okay, I can cope. So the body language and the emotions pouring out within the session show totally broken. But the words are saying, I'm okay. And we gently challenge it just by highlighting it. And it's from their frame of reference. We're saying, you're saying this, and I'm seeing this as you're saying it. And I recognize that I'm seeing this as I say that. And there is the invite. And sometimes a person might go, you know what, I'm not coping. I am broken. I can't go on. I feel like I have to be strong for everyone. And then the person is kind of getting to that point of acceptance and going deeper into that emotion where there is therapeutic value, I guess. Challenging safely is really, really important. So specifically in the early stages of our relationship with clients, a client may view us as the expert, someone who has all the answers. I'm going to my counselor. They're going to tell me what to do. They're going to tell me how to fix this. And if we go into challenge before we've built up the rapport and the trust, and we've balanced the power within the counseling relationship, and that is really, really important, so that we're not seen as the expert that holds all the answers, that we're seen as an equal, as a fellow human that is traveling this journey with the client, because that's what we're trying to do by breaking down that power imbalance. So if we go in too quickly, before that a power imbalance has been addressed, maybe when that client does perceive us as an expert, maybe in that first session or maybe even the second session, it would be inappropriate to bring in challenge, because the client could feel that there's something wrong with them. My counselor said this, so it must be true. So we just want to be aware of that challenge, high challenge works best with high support. So I would suggest that challenge is an advanced skill for that very reason. The relationship must be strong before using challenge. It can feel like a criticism to the client, and they may feel negative, put down, and judged. And that's if we go in too hard, if we go in too early, or if the challenge is not appropriate and gentle and from the frame of reference of the client. So there needs to be a high level of support so that client perceives our unconditional positive regards and knows that they are in a safe place when we use our challenge. So good challenge. What does good challenge look like? How do we know? You know, we're called upon within this training to evaluate our skills, to get together with peers, record it, rewatch it back and evaluate. So if we see challenge, what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for good challenge, and good challenge is always gentle and it is supportive, as opposed to confrontational. Although there is that confrontation in it, as we've already discussed, but it is the confrontation of the client themselves confronting their own incongruence. It reflects only what the client has shared. It's not from our frame of reference. So we will only introduce challenge from what the client has shared. We wouldn't bring in our own bit and put that in. Within challenge, empathy, unconditional positive regard, and congruence are present. And I'm going to share a last example with you in just a moment that's going to show that. And challenge can be present just from our way of being. In other words, there can be challenge present within the therapeutic relationship without us saying a word, just by how we are, how we show up in the session. And that is with the empathy, the unconditional positive regard, and the congruence, because they're so rare in life that way of being would be present within a relationship. So I'm going to show you the example, and this comes from an amazing book, Janet Tolan, Skills in Person-Centered Counseling and Psychotherapy, Sage 2016. And the example here is that client may believe, they can come in, perhaps maybe feeling within themselves that crying is a sign of weakness. And they may tend to block their pain, swallow down their emotions. They don't want to show this to the world because they don't want to be perceived as weak. Now, we know that that's a faulty belief, and that's an emotion that we all need to show and have at some stage, but it feels true for the client. So within their frame of reference, it's 100% true. So when the client brings their pain to the counseling room, the counselor, fully there with them, in that emotion, empathic understanding, completely accepts them for who they are and how they show up, that unconditional positive regard. Maybe that client does start shedding a tear. Maybe they start going, oh, I shouldn't be crying. I'm so sorry that I'm crying. Being there, fully accepting of that, naturally acts as a challenge to the client's idea that crying is a weakness, because here it's being accepted by the counsellor without us even saying a word. And we can even say something along the lines of, all your emotions are welcome here. And therein is a challenge, because the challenge lies in the incongruence, and it's the incongruence which is held within that client.